welcome aboard. This will take about an hour and a half. We have a poetry music up here at 7:30. I'm coming back for that too. It's only about maybe a mile and a quarter. We're going straight up Merrimack Street. I will point out some very well-known Kerouac sites: the library, the Royal Theater, the St. John Baptist Church, St. Joseph's Parochial School, the Watermelon Bridge. Have you got the watermelon? Nobody got one, huh? We'll make one up on the way. And we'll go to the so-called Watermelon Bridge, which is not the original. Because I'll do my rant and rave speech up there because the city tore it down. Now this just gets my... And then we'll go to the Grotto, which is a very sacred site, and then we'll be able to still see, if it's still standing, the Archambault Funeral Home where Jack was waked. So if you're all ready, we're going to head off right now. And
yep.
again, thanks for being here. It's a lot of fun. A lot of work goes into this. I didn't do too much of it because I'm a bit of a Luddite. I don't have any computer. I don't have email. I don't have apps. None of that kind of stuff. So it's just, I rely upon people like Mike and Steve and George and everybody else to give, make sure I know what the hell I'm actually doing. So let's go. I don't even have to look at my notes because I practically live in this building. This is the Paulin Memorial Library, named after a former councilman whose nickname was Slippery Sam. I don't tell that too much to people, but he was a good guy. He used to go to the train station, and every soldier coming back from any war, he'd be there if they're going off. And it was not built primarily as a library. It was built to house the soldiers of the Civil War, the Grand Army of the Republic. This is why it's called Memorial Hall. And you can still see some of the Civil War carvings up there on the third floor landing. This library is the oldest urban library in the United States. Not the Boston Public Library. That's not true. The difference is there was a fee for this. For the first 2 or 3 years, there was a 25-cent fee. The Boston Library was the first large-scale free urban library, but that was built in 1848. The Lowell City Library was established in 1845. This is its third incarnation. Its first place was in the original Lowell City Hall building, which is, you see the gas station sign, and then there's a large 4-story the Manson building, and next to it, that's the City Hall building. Abraham spoke there at one time, not as president. And then they moved next door to the Masonic building, which still stands. Not the Masonic temple, but it was the Masons controlled it. Then this land was owned by the Merrimack Manufacturing Company. Lowell is a National Historical Park because it's the birthplace of the real industry situation in this country, the textile mills. The first one was the Merrimack Manufacturing Company, started spinning cotton back in 1823. This wasn't even Lowell. This was East Chelmsford. Wow. And it became a town in 1826, so in 2 years, big celebration. So this was dedicated in 1893, and the Civil War soldiers were up there on the second floor landing. There's a general named Benjamin Butler, who was a Civil War general. He's the guy that secured Baltimore. Two of the first 4 soldiers from the North, the Civil War, came from Lowell. There's a car coming in here. It's one of the features of the city. You can run over. The red lights are optional. It was Luther O. Ladd and Addison O. Whitney. They are actually buried in front of Lowell City Hall. There's a monument there. That's a grave site. And the average age of the Civil War soldiers from the North was about 18 years 1 month. The Southern soldiers even younger. They were kids. So they got shot marching through Baltimore, and a riot broke out, and they were killed by a mob. So Big Ben Butler went down there, and he captured the city. He surrounded the city with cannons. He arrested the mayor, and they enabled Lincoln to send the troops. Because at the time, Baltimore and the state of Maryland was on the fence about which side, not the south. So all Ben Butler secured it and made sure the troops could go marching right through the whole state of Baltimore. Butler is buried up here in Lowland Gilbert Street in a private cemetery. And the guys were up there smoking their cigars and drinking and so forth. The library was housed in the bottom floor section here. I'm doing a walk here on Saturday called the Haunted Hooky Tour. Jack Kerouac skipped school almost once a week when he was a junior in high school, and even more so as a senior, and he still graduated with honors. He's a smart guy. Where did he go? He used to go here to the library and read books in French, because that was his native American. He didn't learn English much until about 5 or 6. So, I mean, what kid would hook school and go to a library? He did. So that's where he hung out. It's a beautiful building. There was a terrible fire here in 1915, and that whole room with the soldiers were got destroyed. And there's some beautiful Civil War oil on canvas paintings that they're worth a fortune. So I'll tell you about that story, because the problem I have is I go off on these massive tangents and they have nothing to do with Kerouac. But this is where he used to. I got a couple. Let me get a quote here before I forget. This was a sacred place for him. In fact, you see those stained glass windows inside, and you say, no wonder. It was almost like being inside a church. Let's see if I can get the library. Oh no, they know. There's two buried. No, they know who they are. This is from Maggie Cassidy. The book from the library, Scotch Gambit, Queen's Gambit, scholarly treatises on the combination of openings, the glistening chess pieces palpable to dramatize defeats. It was how I become interested in old classical-looking library books, tomes, chess critiques, some of them falling apart, and from the darker shelf in the Lowell Public Library, found there by me in my overshoes at closing time. This is from Doctor Sax. Doctor Sax is a very trippy book. We had a whole reading of it last Saturday, but it's a beautiful treatise on what it was like to be in a blue-collar town. He memorializes his boyhood friends, and it's an amazing piece of writing, kind of a fantasy. By Saturday morning, the sun is shining, the sky is piercingly, heartbreakingly blue, and my sister and I are dancing over the Moody Street Bridge, which no longer exists. That was the Watermelon Bridge, to get out Saturday morning library books. All the night before, I've been dreaming of books. Kerouac always said he was born to be a writer, and that's exactly what he did, and I think quite well. I never even read Kerouac when I was in high school. I went to a private school run by Zavarian Brothers. It was only when I went to college I read about this guy. I got here back in 2004. I joined the Kerouac papers. We talked about Roger Grinnell, the real godfather of the movement here, to preserve his name. And I said, well, this is quite something. I never knew that there was this much. He loved this city. He really did. And a lot of people would kind of disparage it. There was a great actress named Betty Davis, and she was born here in Lowell, and I met her years ago at Symphony Hall. There was a big show. She was about 82 at the time, and they showed all these clips from the movies and so forth, and I went back. I was able to get backstage and meet her, and she looked like a guy in drag doing impersonation of Betty Davis, and she's smoking. I said, oh, Miss Davis, you and I have something in common. And she said, what? And I said, we both come from Lowell. And she said, don't remind me. When they had the big stamp dedication for her, I went up there and told them that story, and the room was dead silence. I think she was just joking. Okay, let's go to Oh, the Royal Theatre building.
Now, what was this?
Royal Theatre.
Royal Theatre.
So take a good look at this.
You can see right through it to the sky.
They are tearing it down. My heart is broken.
I mean, should they be?
Huh?
I thought they were doing it.
Well, the roof is gone. I don't know. It's hard to tell. It's been condemned for years. This is number 488 Merrimack Street. The world-renowned Royal Theatre. It closed in 1966. The last theater in Lowell was the Strand Theatre on Central Street, closed in 1968. It was owned by a guy named George Husson, H-U-S-S-O-N. And there was an apartment building. Oh, here's his name up there in the top. The best part about this, well, there's a lot of good things. Where the big holes in the back, that's where the actual theater was.
Oh.
To get to the theater, you actually walk through the apartment building. That was a lot of fun. There was a little marquee right over here where the structure is outpointed. You'd walk through the apartment building, people living there coming down the stairs were going in there. And it was really, had seen its last days. As a kid, we only hear a lot because they would, in those days, for 25 cents, you'd see 2 feature films, a 3 Stooges shot, a newsreel, and you could stay all day long. There was a massive, the Royal Theatre is mentioned in Visions of Gerard. That's my favorite Kerouac book. On the Road's a great book because to me, the revelation came to the end to Jack that this wasn't the type of a life he wanted to live. Out in the road, you know, loose and wild and all that kind of stuff. The screen had a massive crack in it, and we used to watch the rats right across the stage and so forth. And one day, some friends and I, we went in here and we sat down. The whole road just collapsed. It was amazing. But it was fun. That was the best part of the theater. It was mostly the action going on inside the theater and not basically on the screen. So again, it looks to me like this building is coming down. I can't see how it could be possibly rehabbed.
I know, and that's such a shame because it was in great shape for a long time.
It
and then
was.
they just, there used to be a lot of like, you know, like the balconies and the ceiling, a lot of the wood. Some folks who do this sort of, you know, sneaking into buildings to snap photographs had gotten some of this stuff. I also just wanted to point out to you guys, it's like Jack Kerouac had 2 favorite movie theaters in the city of Lowell. Over the years, by the way, there have been over 40 theaters. There were 9 in operation in his day. A lot of them ran down on Central Street, but his 2 favorites were the one that used to be right over next door to the Kerouac commemorative. It's one called, B.F. Keith's or R.K.L. Keith's, but this was his absolute favorite. One thing that both these theaters had in common is the 2 locations for his father's print shop, Spotlight Print, were literally right next door. If you look where this building in blue is in the back, now you can't get there now, but a little jig off to the right, and there used to be a little alleyway there, and the back door to Spotlight Print was there. Leo Kerouac used to get all the work for the Royal Theatre, so their programs, if they were having some kind of special permit, we're giving away free dishes tonight, he'd be the guy who would print that stuff out. The same thing happened over, okay, at Kerouac Park, or just behind there. That's where the second location of Spotlight Print was. When he moved there, he'd taken out a $3,000 loan from a friend. That was okay, except that he hadn't paid it off when the flood in 1936 hit, and one of the only sections, okay, in that part of the city that actually was inundated by water was right where his printing plant was. The Kerouac kids got free tickets to go to these theaters anytime they want. This was a second-run theater. B.F. Keith's was a first run and a vaudeville theater. So they used to get, the Marx Brothers did vaudeville shows there. Who was Kerouac's favorite?
The 3 Stooges.
No, well, the 3 Stooges would do shows there.
The Marx Brothers?
Yeah, the Marx Brothers.
Was it Grotto?
All 3 of them.
Well, there were actually 5 of them.
Right, but the 3 primary ones. Yeah, you've got Groucho, Chico, okay, you've got Harpo, you've got Zeppo, and
Gummo.
Gummo, yes. Okay, that was going to be the last one.
I'm not a dime richer. I was an usher at the B.F. Keith's Theater. That was the key. R.K.L. Keith chain. Usually with these beautiful outfits with the caps and the flashlights. I wish the hell they had kept it, but and it was great because I used to let a lot of my friends in for nothing. And then the manager got in my case and said, "Hey, we're losing money if we charge these kids." But that's the way it was. And unfortunately, the building got torn down. It isn't actually where the Kerouac commemorative is.
Nope.
There's a side street there, and there's a parking lot. That's where the actual auditorium was.
Why does this feel like it's like a sketch from
Is this building being torn down? Oh, it isn't. Rehab.
What are they going to do with it?
Well, at least it's being saved.
He's just delivering it.
Yeah, that's right. He's the doorman.
The doorman. Good for him.
This is a very important site. This is where Jack had his funeral mass. His brother Gerard was actually baptized here, and Jack was an altar boy back in the day. This is St. Jean Baptiste Church. Lowell had 3 of these massive Gothic-style churches. Mine was St. Peter's, which got demolished years ago. There's one called the Immaculate Conception on the side of town. That's still an active parish. And this was the central church for the French Canadians. There were actually 4 French Canadian parishes here back in the 1910s and 1920s. This is part of the section of Little Canada. I've done tours about that usually in the spring. And the actual real beginning of Little Canada is where the former Lasher ballpark, Lower Spinners was. It extended out here. And at that time, back in the 1910s and 20s, Little Canada was the second most densely populated spot in the entire country per square foot. Only the Lower East Side of New York City. I mean, there weren't 5 million people living here. There were probably around 24,000 French Canadians living here. And I do the Mystic, I do the Mystic tour on Sunday morning. We go up to St. Louis de France Parish. And Jack went there in the 2nd grade. We also go to 34 Bullier Street where Jack's brother died. And Gerard was only 9, Jack was 4. And to me, that's a sacred book. Because he talks about that a lot, the memory of his brother dying. And back in those days, you were waked in the house. One of my aunts died. I remember as a kid going to her home. And we used to call them the parlor or front rooms. And they used to have these homes that have an extension in the front because that's where the casket would go. There wasn't this big funeral industry that was going on back in those days. So here's Jack, and the nuns are coming in, and they're saying their rosary, and the priests are coming in, and Jack is sleeping in the same home where his brother is being waked. So no wonder, Jack always there's always this death thing going on. His best friend, Sampras, dies in World War II. Some of his boyhood friends, which he talks about in Doctor Sax, one proof, he got injured with an ice wagon, something like that. And then we do the Tuckerville tour. Kurt here really knows his stuff and does his real research. I just listen and say, okay, fine. So it's a great little walk that takes place. And this church started in 1929. There was a massive fire here 6 years later, and it closed in 2004. And it is, we hope eventually this will become the Jack Center site for the performing arts. It's going to cost a lot of money, and there are some people like Bob Dylan, Kerouac fans and so forth. There's a very famous photograph of Jack's casket being carried in the church. Allen Ginsberg and so forth are there, and it was quite a thing because you have all this incense going on and so forth. And Father Spike Morissette, for whom Morissette Boulevard is named, gave the eulogy, and he was quite he was quite a different kind of a Roman Catholic priest, really out of the straight-laced, my son, all this kind of stuff. And he really loved Jack a lot. When Jack was really kind of being dismissed and so on, but not Spike. So he gave fittingly the eulogy. Let me just get this quote. And this is from, there's a lot of stuff from Dr. Sax, so it's a book that really should be kind of read if you get a chance. The funeral took place here on October 24th, 1969. His body was taken to the Edson Cemetery, where he's buried with his childhood friend Sammy Sampas. Most of Jack's family are up in Nashville, so if you do the tour with Steve on Monday morning, yeah, that's what you're going to see. This is from Dr. Sax. We come to St. Jean Baptiste Church, and Nen, that's his sister, her nickname, wants to go in for a second to see if the third grade girls at St. Joseph for girls are having the Lenten exercises, wants to check on her girlfriend's little sister. The poor little girls of all they knew that died at 6, 7, 8. Their rosy little lips and little eyeglasses of school, little white collars and navy blue blouses, all underdusted and fading graves, soon sinking fields, black trees of Lowell in your March glare. So that's, you know, and this is where he was waked.
Can I jump in? Guys, you could actually do a tour right where Bill's standing. Literally, you could do a 360-degree, you know, kind of deal, and never leave that spot, and probably do a half-hour to 45-minute long tour about Kerouac sites, literally just here. Okay, over here, there's a red building, this tenement building. That used to be Napoleon Bilodeau Funeral Home. The folks who prepared Gerard Kerouac's body. This is where the original site where his body was taken. Gerard died at 11:45 in the evening on June 2nd. They took his body there, they did what they needed to do. By the 3rd, they brought it back to Kerouac's family home on Beaulieu Street. And it was actually there, they waked the body there for almost 2 full days. Dead body in the house, the front parlor, I mean, you know. Jack's Gothic imagination came from some pretty good places. Okay. Jack used to love to come to a shop. It would have been just past this telephone pole. There used to be a whole group of buildings. He called this little street, Decatur, an Apachean alley. I don't know where he came up with the word Apachean or what the Apache Indians had to do with it, but there used to be a little junk shop here run by a gentleman named Archie Perot. Jack used to like to come here and get 2nd and 3rd copies, used copies of the Shadow magazine. If you know anything about Jack's love of pulp magazines, comic books, there are a lot of the influence behind the character Doctor Sax. Okay, great. Right here used to be a family home and the private practice of a gentleman named Lucien Vitalian Victor Rochette. He was the doctor who actually birthed Jack Kerouac at his home on Lupine Road. He made house calls. He was the only one of the Kerouac children born at home. This is where he lived. This is actually where he lived when he actually died in 1930. Now, I love the poetic symmetry of the fact that the guy who brought Jack into the world is right across the road from the place where Jack kind of officially, religiously left the world. And just a little ways down the road here, you had another doctor's home, okay? That doctor was the grandfather of one of Jack's great friends, a boy named Arthur Eno, who was kind of a local legend. If you don't know about Arthur Eno, who was a lawyer and a scholar and a historian, but he and Jack were really, really good friends when they went to the school that you'll be soon talking about, I'm pretty certain, so I won't say much more about that, okay? And Jack used to go over there after the school day ended because the Eno boy didn't, in fact, live in this district. He lived in a ritzier place in a different section of town. So Arthur used to go to his grandparents' house across the street. They hung out there. And one day, Jack accidentally stepped on his friend's hand while they were playing, and Jack was heartbroken because he admits the first crush that he ever had, the first love he ever felt for someone outside of his own family was this little boy who he thought was the spitting image of his brother Gerard. and then his second Pearl kit. So literally, guys, you stand here and it's like there's Kerouac history everywhere around you. Okay, I've mapped over 150 spots in the city of Lowell that Jack commemorates by writing about them. So I don't know about you, but anyone who like doubts Jack's devotion to Lowell and how much he cared about the place, I don't think you're reading either. You're not reading the right books, or you're not reading deeply enough, because it's all over the place. And even places that no longer exist now, it's strange when I come here, I always feel that kind of uncanny presence. It's like Jack wrote about this. You know, the air feels a little bit denser here, you know, a little bit richer. So yeah, this is a really, really great, but I love that. Dr. Rochette, Spike Morissette, you know, kind of bringing him in, taking him out of the world.
Dr. Rochette. So when I do this lupine thing, I'll say, see that window on the second floor? That's where he was born. And how do I know? Because Rod just said so.
Lupine Roadhouse, yeah.
He knew Dr. Rochette. Dr. Rochette said, because they went from number 7, the bottom floor, to number 9. Why? Because it was warmer, the heat rose. That's so I said.
So you get that Saturday morning, you get that tour.
Yeah.
I know we need to keep going, but the sort of iconic picture of Jack's funeral is, you know, his casket being brought down the steps. And the thing is always, I get a little bit of a kick out of, you've got, I think there's 8 pallbearers altogether.
There were 8.
7 of them are Lowell people. One's Joe Chaput, Billy Cumanzales, who's Jack's friend. So you got these 7 Lowell guys with their coat tie and all that. Then in the middle, you got Allen Ginsberg, with the bald head and the big hair.
Oh, yeah.
It's a very iconic picture. Allen Ginsberg and 7 normal Lowell people. What's your next stop?
Well, actually, this building here was the original site of the Archambault Funeral Home.
Is that right? I didn't know.
Yes. Yep. Way back in the 1910s, 1912, 13, 14. This was the original funeral home. And I tried for years, when the funeral home was still open, to get a picture of that. I've gone through all kinds of books. I did find a photograph, partially, and it says ARCH, and the rest of the cut off, so it does well. But this is where it was.
Yeah.
So
what's your next stop? So I can transport
at the school.
St. Joseph's.
St. Joseph's.
There's a lot of older buildings where you're from, right? You're in the city, or you?
In French, it was a collage. It wasn't a university. It was a middle school. Well, it was actually a grade school, up to grades 5. And Jack went here when he was in the 5th grade, because he was living at 16 Phoebe Avenue at the time. And usually you'd go to the school or the church where you lived. Well, they discovered that Jack didn't really live in the parish. They said, well, you can't come back here in grade 6. So he went to the Bartlett School, which was the first non-Catholic school he ever went to at age 6. In fact, Kerouac skipped the entire 3rd grade, went from 2nd to 4th. He was quite a reader. Now, there's a group called the Coalition for a Better Acre, because at one time, when I did the Little Canada tour, they demolished most of Little Canada, which was an absolute sacrilege and disgrace, because there were buildings there that were in rough shape. But back in those days, it's called so-called days of urban renewal in Boston, especially in Roxbury and Dorchester, New York City. Robert Moses, read about the power broker Robert Moses, what he did. He hated Coney Island and so on. They used to go in and just demolish entire neighborhoods, and they were all poorer neighborhoods. And it was the banker that was behind this. And I went to school with one of his kids. So then these people were just pushed right the hell out. And it's a shame, because they would never do that nowadays. That stuff is stopped. But that's the way it was. So again, this is where he went. And the coalition has done a great job, because it means they are trying to save what's left of the so-called acre, which of course is where St. Patrick's Church is. That's on the National Register of Historic Places. They have masses there in English, Spanish, the ocean, and Vietnamese. It's quite something. So it's just, I always say to people, I said it earlier about, I don't know, if you want to know what Lowell's all about, go to Lowell High School when they get out, and see these thousands of kids coming out from every cultural, ethnic background. It's such a wonderful thing. When Jack's first novel was called The Town and the City because he compared New York City and Lowell, it wasn't called that in the book, because of the ethnic and the immigrant history of those cities. Lowell still is that. The first Cambodian mayor in the country here. And big Cambodian community and so forth, the Vietnamese, and some of the African nations and so forth. And I'm of Polish and Irish background, and we still have St. Anthony's Church, a big Portuguese community in my neighborhood, back central. And I can still hear some of the old timers. They're still speaking Portuguese and so on. There's a Portuguese club. There's the Polish club.
There's a good Portuguese bakery down there too.
Yes, there is. The Olympus, isn't it?
I think it's just called the Portuguese Bakery.
The Portuguese Bakery, yeah.
Yeah, their tarts are.
Yeah, the Don Polski Club is a Polish club. Centralville Polish Club. That's the way it was. So they did a beautiful job in here, and you can always go when they had the doors open. Some of the rooms still retain the original chalkboards, because back in those days, you went up and you wrote with chalk. We weren't doing computer stuff. We weren't TikToking, tweeting, twerking, texting, talking.
I love how twerking just appeared in the midst of all of that.
Yeah, that's it.
This gives you an idea of where Little Canada was. That's all gone.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
This whole section, it's all gone. They just raised hundreds of homes, threw thousands of people out, gave them a pittance to move. And let's see,
So Jack was alive when that happened?
oh sure. And down a block or so, the last two Little Canada tenement buildings were still standing up to 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And they got demolished. And it was UMass Lowell that did it. And I wasn't too happy about that. And when I went down to National Park people, and I went down to City Hall and said, this is wrong. People were living in there. It wasn't a slum. But I forget what reason it was. Right with the wall was over there. They were beautiful buildings, tenement buildings, 5 stories. And I said that was it, the last of the 2 standing buildings. I mean, UMass Lowell has been a great asset to the city of Lowell, no question about it. But Marty Meehan was the president at the time. Now he's running the whole show. I know Marty got $1 billion in money to come into the city to put up, the UMass Lowell Center over there at the crossing. That was the site of St. Joseph's Hospital. That building should have been preserved, but it got knocked down. So did all that money come in? And now I know that, so he did a great deal of good. But I once saw it, I said, what's the story knocking down those 2 buildings? I got some big line, but it's a shame that it all went down. Now, the original Watermelon Bridge. Let me read this before it gets too dark. This was originally the Moody Street Bridge. Moody Street used to run. That still is Moody Street over there. It was famous for all its bars. There were 14 licensed bars back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. All the servicemen from Fort Devens came over here. And Jack was kicked out of basically every single one of them.
So where are those bars?
They're gone.
That's too bad.
They're all demolished. That was Little Canada. That was the real heart of Little Canada. And the bridge, where this shrub section is, this is where the original bridge was. And they were going to tear it down. We said, why are you tearing it down? It's not going to interfere with the new bridge. It makes sense because this is Merrimack Street, so it's straightened it out. There was no reason to tear that down. The bridge was structurally safe. It had been just fixed up not long ago. The state said you can have the bridge. And we got the National Park people involved with this. I got this thing here. Yeah, we had that. I don't have the page on me, but this is. To hold this again for me so I know. Just grab this page here. Oh yeah, here's the thing here too. Save the textile bridge from demolition. City Hall wouldn't listen to us. This is what the bridge looked like. It was a beautiful bridge. We had people here who were running bookshops and coffee shops said would be a walking pedestrian bridge, no traffic. They would set up their cop in the city. They just, and what really, this was the Moody Street Bridge. It became the textile bridge because this is one of the original textile school buildings ahead of us, would come to college. So they named it Textile Street. Then it became University Avenue. So the bridge was Moody Street, then became the Textile Bridge, and it became called a Textile Memorial Bridge because this is where 17 graduates from the old textile school, Technological Institute, became Technological Institute. They died. And we were told for a number of years they didn't have the names. I've got them. We found the names. And the city put up some kind of stone that just says, in memory of those killed. Why don't you put the names there? Here they are, I've got them, and I'm still waiting for it. So it just kind of fries me about those things, that happened.
And that bridge had been in place since 1897.
1897.
You guys know, what Levittown is, historically about the birth of the suburbs?
I'm glad you came
People
along.
who lived, and it wasn't a slum, but people who lived in Little Canada considered going across the river to Pawtucketville to the nice little cottages and the duplex home. That was like their version of moving to the suburbs. That bridge was the span, that's what connected them. Completely separate from the fact that architecturally this was one of the last remaining type of Pratt deck 3-pin truss bridge or some ridiculous thing like that. But the bridge was actually architecturally magnificent.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about, and you may be talking about this, a visual reminder of how severe the 1936 flood was. The undergirding of that bridge, like literally the water overran that, guys. Now, I don't know if you can see where that water is, down there. Okay, but that bridge went right across it. In fact, some of the foundation stones are left if you're adventurous and want to go home with a big rock. But you go across there, the water had to have gone up over 20 feet, 20 vertical feet to be able to reach the undergirding of that bridge. And it used to be a kind of manhood ritual from the boys from Pawtucketville. They weren't going to cross the bridge, right? They were going to scale those beams underneath the bridge. They did that stuff all the time, right? Jump in the canal, all kinds. So the bridge had its historical significance, its social-cultural significance, its architectural significance. As Bill pointed out, I mean, my God, you dedicated the thing to these men from that school right there.
1947.
And then you tore it down.
That was a disgrace.
Excuse me, Bill, have you read the watermelon passage? Have you read the passage yet?
No,
Good. She wanted to hear the watermelon man passage.
Oh yeah.
Is that why we hear watermelon on the tour?
No, he's trying to hide it, but look what he's got.
By the Pawtucket Falls, off of School Street, there's a gatehouse there that James B. Francis, the great water engineer in the 19th century, built that. There's a marker there, shows where that 1936 flood is. In fact, on one of the walks, maybe Monday, I show you the home of one of his teachers lived. I think it was on White Street. And they had sandbagged the street so the water wouldn't flood. And Jack was hoping he was thinking him and I think the Bluff kid, let's take the water bags down so the flood will wash away our house. But the water did hit the house. You can stand at it, you can actually see where it bent in part of the first floor. It's a little bit askew, so yeah, it says, but this bridge has recently faced problems with the city and state officials who decided to replace a new bridge. Fans of Jack fought to preserve the bridge to keep the spirit alive in stories. This is from Doctor Sax. As I ran home across the Moody Bridge, the moon made the mad white horses foam all beautiful and close and shiny, so it was almost inviting to jump in. Everybody in Pawtuckaville had the perfect opportunity to commit suicide coming home every night. That is why we live deep lives. Dr. Sax. This is the famous passage. A man carrying a watermelon passed us. He was just on the boards of the bridge, rewarded by the bridge of Eve and size of stone. The great massive charge of the ever stationary, ever yearning cataracts and ghosts. Suddenly the man fell. We heard the great thump of his watermelon on wood planks and saw him fallen. I got there, I saw the watermelon man staring at the waves below with shining eyes. His mother was screaming in French. Jack, I think, was 10 when this happened. And there were wooden planks in the original bridge. And his mother's saying and screaming, "Il est mort. He's dead, he's dead, he's dead." And it's very descriptive. And there are two candidates for the watermelon bridge. One was a man named William F. Mulgrave, who lived right here in the Pawtuckaville section of Lowell. And William died in 1932, so the date doesn't correspond. The other man, who probably was a man named John Fritz. It's F-R-I-T-Z or F-R-Y-C. Most think that this is probably the watermelon man. So either one of these two, they've been identified. So it's not a thing that Kerouac made up. It was an event that actually happened. So if you're 10 years of age and you see this, and your brother has died, and and his boyhood friends getting hurt and so forth, death was always a constant companion with Kerouac. And because of his Roman Catholicism, especially the French Canadian, about life, death, Jesus on the cross, redemption, and so forth, this was kind of a comfort for him to know that these people are probably with God, Jesus, and heaven and angels. And this is why he dabbed in Buddhism about the circle of life. That's why the memorial has this Buddhist Catholic cross thing there, because he's trying to blend this and try to make sense of a lot of the tragedy. I mean, I don't blame the man for the drinking and so on.
No.
It was a way of medicating. And say for somebody to say, "Oh, that drunken bum," that just drives me nuts, because they don't understand the nature of addiction. I stopped drinking for 20 years. I was driving sometime. I had no memory of it. I'm just damn lucky it didn't kill somebody. So I stopped for 20 years. I go back, I'll have a can of Pabst Blue Ribbon, and so that's about it. I've learned. I went to a lot of programs. So to say that about this man, let's might as well start attacking people like Elvis Presley. Let's go after who's the great the old man in the river and the old man in the sea. Hemingway. And look at these people. Michael Jackson. A lot of these artists.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, Poe, of course, yeah, he's a prime example.
F. Scott Fitzgerald was only 40 when he drank himself.
Yeah, he wrote a book called The Crack Up. Yeah.
You can't condemn the person as such when the legacy they have. These are tortured souls, and Jack certainly was a very tortured soul. And we're lucky to be able to, thanks to people, to Steve, and many, Roger, keeping that memory alive. We're not trying to idolize anybody. We memorialize in the best sense of that word. So now, one of the great parts of this whole weekend is about to occur when, thanks to our friend George, not here, we're going to throw it off the bridge in memory of dear old Jack and William.
Where'd it go?
Oh, it's split out.
Oh, look at it.
Well, that's good for the ducks.
That's high up there.
Back to the earth.
The Ashenbaugh Funeral Home is next to the Franco-American School. Well, it just closed about 5 years ago, where Jack's body was waked in October of 1969. The Ashenbaugh family are the owners of the home. The relatives of the first Franco-American mayor, Dewey G. Ashenbaugh of Lowell in 1936. Beat writers Gregory Corso, Allen Ginsberg, John Cleland Holmes, and Peter Orlovsky, along with the Sampras family, Jack's in-laws, and Jack's friends attended. This is from Doctor Sax. The first of the stations faced the side of a funeral home. Now the stations of the cross were originally right here. They moved them, so we'll go down there. So you kneel there at night looking at faint representations of the Virgin, hood overhead, her sad eyes, the action, the tortured wood and thorns of the Passion, and your reflections on the subject become mirrored from the funeral home, where a dull light fixed in the ceiling of an overpass rain garage for hearses shines dully in the gravelly gloom, with bordering dewy grass plots and shrubs to give it the well-tended look, and the drapes in the windows showing incredibly where the funeral director himself lives, in this house of death. This is our home. And ironically, that's where he was waked. The Ashenbaugh home has been closed now for, I think, the last 3 or 4 years. I see a dumpster there, so I think it's going to be salvaged. There used to be 3 funeral homes. The Lauren is still open because St. Joseph's Hospital, where UM Lowell Crossing is, that's where the hospital was. So they figured, well, they're going to be called there quite a bit to pick up people who've died. I ran into Mr. Ashenbaugh some years ago, and he told the story that when he was a kid, when he was younger, this old crappy bus pulls up, and this scraggly looking guy gets out and says, "Where's the grotto?" And he says, "It's right over here." So the guy gets in the bus, comes over, and then this other guy comes across and says, "Do you know who that was?" And Dewey says, "I don't know." And it was Bob Dylan. And Bob was looking for the grotto, and he ran in, he met Allen Ginsberg. Now Dylan's last name is Zimmerman, so Dylan asked what this is all about, and Allen says this is a very sacred place where people, you'll see when we get down there, it's not just a Catholic thing. You can be an atheist, whatever you want. People write these beautiful expressions for it's like prayers for people who are suffering. And so Allen explains you can light a candle, and you know, and you can, that's it, you say a prayer. So Dylan does, and he starts walking away with the candle, and Allen says, "You're supposed to leave it here." And Dylan said, "I bought it, I'm taking it." But he did put it there. Now we thought this was a kind of a made-up story, but again, thanks to Roger Burnell, who talked to Allen about that, and Ginsberg said,
Yes,
that actually happened. So it's a great story.
Yeah.
Good old Bob, I know, you know, grabbing the candles, I'm taking it with me. They were big candles and so on.
There's some great pictures too of both Ginsberg and Dylan just playing with the kids who were out on recess from the Franco-American school here. There used to be swing sets and stuff in here. So they're like just playing and having a good time. And you can tell the kids, all they know is that these are 2 pretty funny looking dudes who are just hanging out here. Because Dylan's got, you know, he's got the big, you know, kind of cowboy hat and the hair. And then Ginsberg, of course, was very singular in his kind of strangeness.
Well,
but
this
kind
Steve has said it about the mass at the St. Louis de France. And you know, the altar boy says, "Look at these kind of weird looking people out here for this." That's because of that celebration that the priest had and so on.
Yeah.
So, well, I mentioned now, this building here, the first one, this very beautiful old, was built in 1879 by Frederick Eyre. Frederick Eyre's brother was James Cook Eyre, who ran the largest medicine company in the entire world. I just did a medicine tour last week because Lowell is the home of Moxie, the soda.
Yeah.
And most people don't like it. I love Moxie. It was invented here by Dr. Augustine Thompson back in 1884. It's older than Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, and Moxie were all invented in the 1880s as medicines. I have an original bottle of Moxie from the 19th century. It says Moxie Nerve Food Tonic. That's what it was. And
Nerve food,
when
yeah.
Ayer died, he was worth $20 million back then. That's not inflated. So, and his brother wound up marrying, I think, General Patton's daughter. He only lived here a few years. The Oblates got the property in 1918, and this became the Franco-American Orphanage. And then it later became the Franco-American School, and it just closed, I think, 6 years ago or so. So the school building is the largest section on the right. And the grotto was probably in danger of being removed. And the city finally did something right on this. LCK people, blah, 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 said, no, this has to be saved. This is a very holy ground. And to their credit, again, I think it's TMI, the St. John d'Arc Church, they said sure. But they just moved the stations down. But these are the original stations, the original cross. So we'll talk a lot about that and show you the altar area, and I hope the book is still there. In all my years coming here, I've never seen anybody vandalize this property. Say, and you read some of those petitions, say, boy, this is powerful. So if you're a little kid here, you're going with your mother, and at nighttime, and it's nice, it's dark now, you see that the cross, say, boy, this is some
road. You get certain views, and it looks like it's hovering in the air, and it's not. It's like suspended up there. I had to run in here one of the first times. I wanted to come and photograph this place at dusk or at night. As I said, you know, Kerouac describes this, you know, the night of the Watermelon Man incident, right? He and his mother are going, they get to the first station, I think as Bill alluded to, Jack is like, you know, this place freaks him out a little bit. Like, if you look at the Stations of the Cross, that's some pretty good, that's horror film stuff. That's nightmare fuel stuff. Lots of, you know, blood and gore. And Kerouac's there, and he's trying to, it's this time of night, right? And he looks over and he sees that place, and he writes about the, you know, the house of death, where a couple of decades later, his body's going to be waked. I mean, it's weirdly prophetic. And just on one of these side streets is where his uncle Joe used to live. Okay, so his father's brother lived down one of those streets, and right next door to their house on 18 Washington was a garage for hearses. Okay, so some of the extra, they had more than one hearse, so they parked in there. So Kerouac didn't like going to his uncle's house because, you know, it smelled funny because he smoked these therapeutic, you know, cubeb cigarettes. Okay, he was also very sickly, and he cried a lot. He was very demonstrative. The place freaked him out because he's like, you know, just going in here. So Jack started actually visualizing this character, Doctor Sax. One of the places where he would see Doctor Sax, which is, by the way, my favorite book. You'd see Dr. Sax scaling the side of this building with his suction cups, which is a riff taken right from the old Shadow mags. You'd see him flitting in and out of the Stations of the Cross here. So it's one of the ways he dealt with his fear of being in this place. This is really heavy stuff. And his mother would explain to him what all of this stuff meant, and it wasn't, you know, easy to hear. And as Bill will describe, there's a ritual involved getting to that crucifix that most people nowadays, I'm pretty sure, don't do when they're here worshiping. Okay, so, you know, it's pretty dark stuff. In fact, the whole reason they were here is that they had to walk one of Jack's cousins home, who lived over in this house. She was too freaked out to make the walk by herself. So Jack and his mother and his, you know, his cousin, they make the walk, and then they got to walk home after this. So Jack is like, you know, this is kind of sketchy. And then one night they do that, they watch a guy die on the bridge in front of them, you know. So it certainly doesn't help, you know, turn Jack into, like, you know, let's rose-colored glasses tonight, you know, no way.
Oh, no, I didn't see it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been here before.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
So here we are. The Grotto and the Stations of the Cross was constructed in 1911 behind the Franco-American School. The building that hides the grotto was built in 1876 and purchased in 1900 by the Oblate fathers. It was renamed in 1963 to the Franco-American School. He mentions the grotto many times in Doctor Sax. This is from Doctor Sax. The grotto, it hugely moved ahead to us, to the right, that baleful night. It belonged to the orphanage in the corner of Pawtucket Street and School Street, the head of the White Bridge, which is the School Street Bridge. A big grotto is their backyard, mad, vast, religious. The 12 stations, actually 14, there's 12 stations of the cross, little individual 12 altars set in, you go in front, kneel, everything but incense in the air. And I will show you the steps, but this is one of the candles that Bob would have lit, and say they never marked it, but this is, they have kept all these beautiful books that people, here's one that's right here. Dear Lord, I pray to you to help my mom and help my family because my mom is struggling and I want to help her. Also, I want to help my dad and make him a better man. Amen. There are all these beautiful, beautiful petitions and prayers. You don't have to be the Pope to come here and do this. It's people, whether they are believers or not, because I just think faith and prayer are very powerful in our lives. We all believe in something, whether it was Elvis Presley, the Beatles, or favorite books and authors. We believe in ourselves. This is a representation of the appearance of the Virgin Mary and Lourdes, and it's a pretty fairly accurate representation. And so I'm going to go around the stairs. But people come here a lot, and so I myself do that, and just to read some of these things, and it kind of gets you out of yourself and say, even if you're struggling too, just say that. It can be anonymous, but this, she actually put her name here and so on. So these, and this has been going on for a long time. That's why, there were people said we need to really keep this grotto here as a representation for all people's aspirational hopes and dreams and desires and so forth. And I think this is one thing the city really, I kind of forgive them for knocking down the Watermelon Bridge and the tenements, but it did this. So we'll go by the steps, and I'll mention about, as Kurt said, about the stairs, and a lot of people walk. It's kind of a tough thing to do. We'll walk up them, we're not going to.
If I can mention one thing, there used to be a staircase here. One night I was here during LCK. I don't know if you ever had that sense around, it's kind of dark, maybe you're a little more hyper aware of your surroundings. I heard a noise behind me and I looked, and there was a guy sleeping on the stairs. He was a homeless guy. I went over to him and I said, hey, is everything okay? And we talked for a second, and I ended up giving a couple of dollars. But I said, is this where you're sleeping? He says, yeah. I said, what? I said, that can't be very comfortable up there. He said, he pointed to the cross. He said, I find this comfortable. He says, it makes me feel safe being here. And I was like, here's somebody who's been scraped, right down to the bedrock, who's telling you, for whatever reason, just this germ of faith that this place still represents for people, was important enough to him. He was going to sleep outdoors, in an October night in probably like 2012 or thereabouts in that time. And I remember thinking, wow, okay, so I kind of just left him there, and I was like, I asked about it the next day. I said, do people do that? And someone said, no, I've never seen anyone there. I said, well, so I did have kind of a unique experience, and it was kind of strangely comforting.
top, kneeling on every step. Those steps there are the normal. These are shorter, so they could kneel. Up at St. Joseph's Oratory in Montreal, Canada, they have the same kind of a similar thing. And I used to see these people, and back then they were a lot older than I was then, going up these stairs. So it's quite a thing to do that. But I remember seeing some people I met there sometimes, and they got their rosary beads out, and they would say the Hail Mary, Our Father, glory be at each step, and so on. This was all recently refurbished in all the stations, and it was all done voluntarily, free of charge. This is the representation of the crucifixion of Christ. Most of us see just the crosses. The so-called corpus is what they call the actual crucifix. Historians know that this would not have been the actual place where the spikes were put. They were put by the wrists, because the Romans were experts at this kind of a thing. Teach their enemies, you don't fool around with Rome. It's rather interesting that the seat of the Roman Catholic Church is in Rome, because the spikes, your wrist bones would hold it in place. If you put them in your hand, they would slice through. And they probably put the 2 feet together.
And they didn't want you to bleed, and they didn't want you to bleed to death. This is
no.
gruesome. Like,
no.
The point wasn't like bloodletting
No.
here. Yeah, there was a certain amount of blood, and that's visually spectacular.
Jesus died because he died of asphyxiation. The weight pulled down and would cut off your air supply. And the Romans wanted you to know that. This was an example. There were thousands of crucifixions that were taking place. The lettering in rye was kind of a cruel joke, slap against the ancient Hebrews. It stands in Latin for Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Iessus Nazarean Rex Judiorum. And they stuck that on there to say, there's your king. Their whole thing, you know, the plays about Jesus and the last days and Pontius Pilate. It's interesting too. I mean, there really was a Pontius Pilate. They actually found references to this man. And shortly after these events occurred, he was called back to Rome and basically said, you're through, because of the continuation. Back in those days, the Jewish people considered the Christians to be a sect of theirs. They were the Jewish Christians, and then gradually things kind of separated. I'd been over to Jerusalem, the so-called Via Dolorosa, the way of the cross. It is actually mostly intact as far as the actual route was. It's buried, of course, under centuries of rubble and sand that fell. And the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is probably the most authentic. The Church of Bethlehem where Christ was born, there's some real dispute about that. But the Sepulchre, they believe this is actually where Christ was crucified, because the Emperor Hadrian, his wife, converted. And Hadrian had built a little shrine at Golgotha in honor of one of the Roman gods. And he converted that into the Church of the Sepulchre. That original church was gone a long time ago. The church that's there right now does stand back from the days of the Crusades. So that's probably really the spot where this actually happened. So it's quite a thing if you ever get over there. Although right now, all that terrible stuff going on over there, it's just tragic. So this is the kind of the conclusion. We'll walk by the stations, And then, who's got the time? I never wear a watch.
7:22.
Oh, so we get time to get back. Well, the beginning a little bit late for the party. Then I'm gonna sit back and. So let's go down here. Just watch a step here. Yes. These are painted in awfully pastel psychedelic colors some years ago, but they came in here and they did a nice job. I want to just point out the Pawtucket Falls are over there. This is the James B. Francis Gatehouse. It still works, but you see where the fencing is across the river. The flood hit just about the midsection part of that fencing of 1936. That's how damaging that flood was, and that's where Jack's father's shop was just destroyed.
So if this is the Francis Gatehouse, what's the one by the ice cream stand called?
Oh, that's also that's the.
They have the same name.
The same, yeah. That's
Okay.
This is really the gatehouse. That's the lock.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that original Georgia pine still twice it saved the city. In fact they lowered it back in 2006.
Yeah.